Hello and welcome back to the building of this auxiliary wing, or axle wing as I've referred to it. I'm now going to sheet it. I had hoped to sheet it in ply, but I think I mentioned in the last video when I've looked to my supply of thin ply, there's just not enough to do the job properly. So I'm going to use some balsa, and I'm sure that once that has been not varnished, doped and covered in cloth, it'll be extremely robust. So I'm sure it'll do the job. I've clamped it in place with two clamps here, but that is free to swivel to a certain extent. It's restricted by the opening for the legs, and as I've mentioned before, that's finely locked in place with the addition of clamps and the collets or clamps here. I may actually make new ones because these fall a little bit low. I might shape a little piece of metal to be more like a kidney shape or a heart shape that would be more effective. But once they're put on there and screwed onto this end plate, that'll fix the final angle that I need. But let's crack on. This is the balsa. So the first job would be to mark up the length, and I'm going to start planking it, I suppose it is planking or sheeting it from the front. Take it up to the axle, but not cover the axle. There's no need to. And then carry on behind, and the reason for that is it'll finish nicely on this solid light ply trailing edge, and that gives me something nice to put the final piece on. So it makes more sense. I'm going to have a final look at it. I think it needs a little bit of sanding on here. These have now been glued on, so it can't come off short of cutting it off, and the dowels have been glued into place. If I just show you them. So those dowels are now locking this end plate onto the main wing. And I'm just going to give that a final little tittle. I think it needs a little bit more off here and off here, and then we'll crack on with the sheeting. Okay, so I've cut a length off here. Obviously it's wider than it needs to be. I'm going to set that back a little. We'll cut this off and then try it on. Now, normally, I think in this situation, I probably would have just used CA and glued along each of the ribs. But just due to devilment, as me grandmother would say, I want to try something I've seen Cliff Harvey doing, and that is using white glue and letting it dry and reactivating it with an iron. Now, I have done that with plywood, and I was quite surprised when Cliff was able to use it on balsa, because I'd always considered balsa to be a very efficient insulator, and I was quite surprised that the heat went through with the iron. So I just want to try it for myself and see how it works. So I'll cut those out. And that's the best thing about this YouTube community of modelers and builders. It's picking people's brains and seeing what they think and seeing if it works. And I've found the input from some of the chaps on the YouTube, but some who are YouTubers themselves, but others who have contributed. Some of the help's been invaluable. You get the odd daft comment, but you just take that in good spirit. I think you've got to. But the vast majority have actually offered useful advice. If I'm not going to use it there and then, I've stored it in the old grey cells to use at a later date. So I'm just going to try this and see if it works. Let's get some glue and a brush, and I'm going to apply this. Let it dry, have a coffee, and then we'll come back and see if it irons on. If it does, I'm sending a hug to Cliff Harvey. If it doesn't, I'm sending him a nasty letter in the mail. Only joking. Let's give it a go. I'm going to feather the balsa. Normally I would step a sheet along this leading edge, but in this case I'm actually just going to feather it in because there's enough of an overlap that the feathering won't substantially weaken the actual sheet itself. It's the only danger I think when you do a feathering technique, you can take so much on off, there's nothing left. So let's brush that on. Whoops. I'm not brushing it in, I'm just brushing it evenly. And then use it to transfer the location of the glue to the sheet, and then apply some more on there, and then let it dry and try ironing it on. Just curious. Whoops. Hopefully that's transferring. Yeah, you can see where the glue is. So I'll apply a little bit more glue to here. Oops, if you open the glue. And then we'll let that dry. And then apply heat, and with a bit of luck it'll work. I don't see why it shouldn't actually, because it's the way I put the it's the way that I actually apply the dress lining when I'm doing covering. As I say, the thing that I was unsure about and quite surprised at is that I thought this balsa sheet would insulate quite a lot, but obviously when it's this thin it doesn't really come into play. So coffee time, leave that to set, dry, totally dry, and then we'll try applying it with the iron. Well, the glue's dried now on the sheet and on here. The iron's on, it's warmed up I think. I've applied some water to this to curve it slightly. I don't know if that's going to interfere with the heating process. So here we go, let's see if this works. Well, you can hear the water coming out from the... Oh yeah, it's sticking. I'm absolutely amazed at that. I'd always considered, as I've repeated myself now quite a bit, that it would act as an insulator, but shows how wrong I was. Teaching a dog new tricks, as they say. Thank you very much, Cliff Harvey. I have used this before with ply, but I never even thought about using it on balsa. And there you go, there's the proof. That's not going anywhere. Very impressed. Just curving it round as I go. And I can imagine on the big glider, the Cliff's building, this would be an absolute godsend when it came to covering the fuselage. I mean, how else would you do it? It would be a nightmare trying to pin it. But this really does serve serve a good purpose. It's a great technique. Thank you very much. Right, so that's stuck. Here's the first part of this one. And then there's just a strip to put along the back there. That's definitely done the job. Great stuff. And I can feel that that's really taken well. Cool. So I'll cut this excess and I'll use that to finish this part at the back. I'll do that and then we'll flick it over and we'll have a look at the other side. I think I'll be using the same technique. Bit of heat there required. That's glued. Okay. Upper surface now. I've left the wheels on because it just gives me a little bit of support while I'm doing this. This heat here. Yeah, it works remarkably well. Just at that point it doesn't stick. It's working though. Might need to turn the iron up a little way actually. It's hard to judge what you need, of course. Turn that up a little bit more. Hold it while it cools. It hasn't stuck there. I think if you don't let it dry out properly, this doesn't work as well. If you try to rush it. That seems to have worked. Oops. Yeah, I think if you apply the heat, of course it softens the glue, and if you then take it off, there's nothing holding it down. So apply the heat, hold it in position, take the heat off, and then you've got a good joint. Yeah, that's excellent. Do the front bit. This is just gets a little bit awkward because obviously it's not removable. But we'll get that set up and then we'll finish it off. In the home straight now. Here we go. Let's see. I can get this bit tacked on at the back first. You may be able to hear that I've wet the outside again. It's hissing away there. That's taken well. love trying new things, new techniques. I visited Alan's workshop yesterday and he was able to show how he uses silk to cover his models. It's an old school technique, but one I wanted to learn because I haven't been altogether happy with how things went with the cirrus moth, and you know, covering's getting more and more difficult to find, and I'm looking for alternatives. For the bigger models, I'll be sticking with the dress lining. I think it offers a really good solution. But for medium size to smaller models, this has huge potential in silk over tissue. If you want to check out that video, it's worth having a look at. And somebody asked the question, what does it weigh? Is it lighter? And it felt a lot lighter, but just out of curiosity I weighed it and I came out with a weight approximately 18 grams per square metre. Now I don't think anybody could complain at that sort of weight. So check that out if you haven't already done so. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. It's a way of keeping up to date with all these crazy projects. And if you're anything like me, you just love watching other people modelling as well. You learn a lot, but it's also, if you can't fly and you can't model for whatever reason, at that particular time, I just love watching other people doing jobs and they come up with different solutions. This is all but done. Very impressed, very, very impressed with this as a technique. And that's taken. So it only needs to be, the excess to be trimmed off and given a sand down. I'll not finish sand it, I'll just give it a quick rub down. I don't like to do the finish sanding until I'm ready to cover, because invariably it gets dinged and knocked and bashed. So I like to leave that until the last minute before I'm ready to cover. There you go. Final shot will be when I've trimmed the excess off and we'll see what it looks like. But I think you get an impression there of where we are with it. Obviously the collets need putting on. I think it's looking cool. Well, there we have it. All done and dusted. Well, I don't know about the dusted, but that's the axle wing or auxiliary wing completed. I'm pleased with that. We've got that piece there that I thought was essential. The undercarriage is obviously bent up. It just needs cladding now with some balsa and then a bit of fiberglass on it, or resin. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I'm really pleased it's done. Obviously these little bits to do, axles to cut and pins to locate through, but starting to look the business now. Thanks for looking in. Take care, everybody.